Hey everyone, Mr. Skelton here, back at it for lesson 5 in geometry. This is our last lesson of the unit. This is identifying angle pairs. So today we're going to be talking about really 5 different types of angle pairs and how you identify them and what they can do for you in terms of solving problems down the road. So the first one here, kind of giving an example how we're going to do these notes. You have the definition of a straight angle. So we'll call this one 1A. We'll call that a straight angle. A straight angle, you know already, we've talked about this, right? An angle that measures 180 degrees, that's just a straight line, okay? That's a straight angle. So the second one we're going to talk about is our angle pairs. So every picture that we draw here is going to have angles that you can make as pairs. So the first one is vertical angles, and let me give you the definition of it. It's two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. Okay? Let me draw you an example of vertical angles. So basically just draw two lines that are intersecting. Okay? And I'm going to use my colored markers here, or my colored pens, so that you can really see what these are. Okay? So 1 and 2 would be considered vertical angles. Okay? And there's a theorem, and we haven't talked a lot about theorems, but there's a theorem that states that vertical angles are congruent. Okay? So angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. All right. Vertical angles, a lot of students remember them different ways. They kind of make V's, right? These V's kind of butt up to each other here in the middle. I hope you can see that like 1 and 3 would be considered an angle pair that are supplementary, right? Because they're on a straight line, so they make 180. But when you have lines that intersect like this, and they have to intersect perfectly, then these right here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, are called vertical angles. Now, they're not all equal to each other. Like 1 doesn't equal 3, and 3 equals 2, and 2 equals 4. 1 and 2, so they're kind of opposites of each other, and 3 and 4 are equal to each other, and that's vertical angles. Okay? The next definition is adjacent angles, and basically adjacent angles just means angles that are kind of next to each other. All right? There's a big definition for this. But I'm just going to put angles that are next to each other. Now, I know it's not a real great math definition, but let me draw a couple examples of adjacent angles for you. Okay, I'll put angle 1 and angle 2. Angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent to each other. They share this ray right here. So we would call those adjacent to each other. I can do something like this also. So 1 and 2. 1 and 2 would be considered adjacent angles. They're just next to each other. All right? Now, adjacent angles, they don't have any theorem attached to them like vertical angles. Vertical angles is something you're going to see throughout all of geometry. It's an important one. You're going to see it a lot. And the fact that vertical angles are equal, that is big information, and we'll use it down the road. But adjacent angles, it's really just an identification. It's seeing that they share something in the middle that creates the two angles. Okay? Complementary, so we're getting down towards the bottom here. So the definition of complementary is two angles that have a sum of 90 degrees. Okay? Two angles that make 90. And you can write this in a couple different ways. The most common one that you're probably familiar with is the old 90-degree box, right? And then if I just put in a ray like that, I could say angle 1 and angle 2 together, those make 90 degrees. Angle 1 plus angle 2 has to equal 90. That fits the definition, right? Two angles that have a sum of 90. So that's an example of complementary angles. However, you could also have another example like this. I'll just do this one real quick. Let's say that this is 50 degrees here, and this is 40 degrees here. I could say that these two, obviously if you add them together, they equal 90 degrees. So they don't have to be on one diagram. Complementary, by definition, is just two angles that add up to 90. Now, more commonly, you're going to see this in your homeworks and as we go, but those make 90 degrees, okay? The last one, supplementary, is kind of the same definition, except now it's two angles that have a sum of 180 degrees, okay? The most common picture you're going to see for this is one you've already seen on these notes. So if I say angle 1 and angle 2, obviously any straight line is 180 degrees. We talked about that was our very first part of the notes, right? A straight angle. So angle 1 plus angle 2 has to equal 180 degrees here because they're on a straight line. Whatever this is, we know has to equal 180. However, again, you can have a situation where you have two separate angles, right? Something like this, and then, you know, something like this. And angle 1, let's say, is, you know, 170 degrees, and this is 10 degrees. Obviously, that's not true, but, you know, you can see that together. If I added those two separate angles together, that's going to equal 180. Okay, so you have complementary, which is 90, supplementary, which is 180. You're going to have to know those terms. Know that complementary is 90, supplementary is 180. All right, let's look it over, turn it over on the back. And we're just going to practice a couple problems here. So we're basically just identifying, and on some of these you could maybe have more than one answer, which is fine with me. So I want you to go ahead and hit pause, and what I want you to do is use the definitions and these names of the angles that we went through on the first page, and see if you can identify the type of angle pair you have here at the top, okay? Just do A, B, C, and D, and then I'll come back and check on you. All right, we're back. So what type of angle pair are 1 and 2? You could say that these are adjacent, right? They're next to each other. But more commonly, we would say that these are complementary because they equal 90 degrees together, because you can see the 90-degree box. So both of these would work. I would probably go with complementary because adjacent also works. They are adjacent. They share this ray right here, which makes them adjacent to each other. Okay. Next one here is also complementary because we know they equal 90 degrees, 40 plus 50. Okay. Part C, you could say adjacent. Right? They share this ray right here in the middle of them that makes it. But angles 1 and 2 together, notice they're on a straight line, right? They're on a straight line right here, and any straight line is always 180 degrees, so this right here is 180. So these two together, if I added them together, they have to make 180, so we would call those supplementary because they equal 180 degrees, all right? And then the last one, this is again one that you're going to want to familiarize yourself again with. You have two perfectly straight lines there, and you have another line there, and when those two lines intersect, you have vertical angles forming. So when two lines intersect perfectly, you have vertical angles. So 1 and 2 would be considered vertical angles. And just as a reminder, I'm going to remind you often that vertical angles are congruent. So angle 1 is equal to 2. So if that's 70, that's 70. If that's 80, that's 80, et cetera, et cetera. Even though I don't have numbers here, these two in the opposite spaces that are blank, those are also vertical angles, so those are also equal, okay? I just want to show you how that works just real quick. I'm actually going to draw the same picture kind of right above it. And I'm going to put some angle measures in. So if I put 70 here, this angle right here has to be 70, right? Because they're vertical angles. But if I just cover up this bottom part, okay, what does this angle right here have to be right next to the 70? Hopefully in your mind you're saying, oh, that's got to be 110 because this is a straight line, right? And straight lines make 180. So this would have to be 110, which means this has to be 110 because those are vertical. And that should make sense. Look at all the straight lines you have. Try to do this. That's 110. What if I cover up this bottom part and you look at that straight line, right? This is a straight line right here. 110, and 70. So you can kind of work yourself around the picture without making you sick here. And I cover that up. That's a straight line going right through here from left to right. So 70 and 110 makes 90. So that's why vertical angles work, okay? And that's why they're congruent to each other. All right, doing the same thing on this second example. So go ahead and hit pause, and let's see if you can answer these questions here. There's 4 of them actually on the right-hand side, and just pause after that. Okay, we're back. Name a pair of vertical angles. This is tricky for some students, but you're looking for 2 straight lines that are intersecting. Okay, so I notice this one here, and I notice this line here. 5 and 3. I'm going to put my little, this means congruent, by the way, when you see these little markings here. I should probably go back and put those on my, that is equal to this. That means vertical. When you see those little half moons in red, those mean vertical angles, okay? So angle 5 is congruent to angle 3. That's a pair of vertical angles. If you wanted to just put angle 5 and angle 3, those are vertical angles. Now I'll have a lot of students try to tell me on this picture that like 2 and 5 are vertical. But if you look at 2, angle 2 is formed by this ray, or this line or ray right here. That doesn't go all the way through the middle. So you just have to be careful. Vertical angles are always formed by 2 straight lines. 2 and 5, people will tell me 4 and 1. A lot of people say 4 and 1. But if you look at how 4 is formed by this line and this line here. 1 is formed again by this ray, which doesn't even come through. So 1 and 4 are not vertical angles because it's not 2 straight lines. Okay? Pair of adjacent angles. These are just angles that are next to each other. You could say angle 2 and angle 3. They're next to each other. You could say 3 and 4. You could say angles 5 and 4. There's a couple different pairs of vertical angle, or excuse me, adjacent angles. Those are just angles, again, that are next to each other that are formed by a common ray. Complementary, that means equal to 90. So when I look at this, I see my 90-degree box right there. So 2 and 3, I know angles 2 and angle 3 have to be equal to 90. All right? And that's about it on that. I know people will say angle 1 is 90, which is correct, but that's not a pair. That's just a singular angle there, so we have to be careful with that. Name a pair of supplementary angles. So let me tell you what students will do wrong here. A lot of students will say 1, 2, and 3. Well, that's correct, but that's not a pair. A pair is 2. So 1, 2, and 3, yes, it does make 90. We just want a pair. So my eyes immediately go to 5 and 4. If I look at angle 5 and 4, those have to equal 180, right? There's angle 4 and there's 5. They're on a straight line. If you also look at this line right here, you'll see 3 and 4 together make 180 degrees. Again, a lot of students will say, how about 5, 1, and 2, Mr. Skelton? Well, that's true. 5 plus 1 plus 2 does make a straight line, but we want a pair, so we wouldn't say that those are pairs, but it does make 180, okay? All right, down here at the bottom, last one. Go ahead and hit pause, see if you can answer those questions, and I'll check back with you. Okay, number 1, does 1 equal 2? How do you know? Yes. Markings. We know that 1 equals 2 based on these markings right here, okay? So if you have these markings, you know that those angles are congruent to each other, so we know the answer is yes. Does 1 plus 2 equal 90? How do you know? We don't know. Okay? There's no 90-degree box anywhere. So there's no markings here. I have no idea. Now, does it look like they're 90? It does, right? Some students are going to say, well, look at this right here. 1 and 2 and 3 looks like it's 90 degrees, but there's no markings there, so we can't say that. Remember, in geometry, don't assume just by what something looks like that it's 90 or 180 or whatever. If you look right above, this example has the box. You know that's 90 because there's a proper marking there that says it's 90. Don't assume that 3 is 90, so just be careful there. Last one, are 1 and 5 supplementary? How do you know? Here's 4, here's 5. If I add those together, do they make 180 is what this question's asking. The answer is yes. Okay? Angle 4 and angle 5 are supplementary. They're going to equal 180. because they are on a straight line. That straight line is right there. Okay, and there's 5 and there's 4. So really important that you get yourself familiar with these definitions that we went over on the front side there. All those different kind of angle pairs, straight angle, which is 180, which you know, but these are kind of new for you. The biggest one I think that you're going to see throughout geometry is vertical angles, and just knowing that those are congruent to each other. So just be aware of that. And the rest of them, complementary is 90, supplementary 180. Those are big as well. Okay, so if you have questions in class, I'm happy to go over them with you. Good luck on your homework.